It was supposed to be a routine Monday. Kevin Stefanski at the podium, the usual injury updates, a few coachy lines to smooth over a tough loss. Instead, the room crackled. What came out of that press conference read less like encouragement and more like a verdict. Sanders thrust into action in Baltimore when Dillon Gabriel entered concussion protocol didn't get the hero's welcome everyone expected. On the surface, you see the numbers: incomplete throws, a turnover, sacks. But the bigger story is the context behind those stats, the things you don't spot on the box score. Stefanski's words were polite, almost clinical. He was trying to make a play. The throws weren't good enough. Decision-making needs work. Coach language, when stripped down, translated to one blunt fact: pedigree doesn't buy leeway in the NFL. Then came the leaks and the takes that rewired the narrative. Insiders claiming Sanders hadn't run meaningful first-team reps, veterans and analysts blasting the team's preparation, and Myles Garrett stepping in publicly to steady the rookie. This intro isn't about burying Sanders, it's about setting the scene. A rookie thrown into a storm of blitzes and exotic looks, forced to throw to receivers he barely practiced with, evaluated under a microscope by a coach who measures success in wins, not hype. The question now isn't whether he has talent, it's whether the Browns gave him a fair shot to show it. Kevin Stefanski walked into that press room with the calm, steady tone he always carries, but this time, something felt different. His words weren't loud, emotional, or dramatic. They were quiet, controlled, precise, and somehow that made them hit even harder. When he was asked about Shedeur Sanders' debut, he didn't sugarcoat a single thing. He didn't lean on cliches about rookie learning curves or valuable experience. Instead, he chose phrases that said everything without saying it outright. The kind of coach language that sounds harmless until you understand what it really means. He said Sanders was just trying to make a play. That might sound supportive, but in NFL vocabulary, it's a polite way of saying the quarterback forced throws that shouldn't have been made. He mentioned that the throws weren't good enough. That's the sanitized version of the ball placement was off, the timing wasn't right, and the decisions didn't match what the moment demanded. And when reporters pushed him about the possibility of Sanders earning more opportunities, Stefanski shut it down immediately. No hesitation, no speculation. Dillon Gabriel would start when he's cleared, and that was that. What really stood out wasn't what Stefanski confirmed, it was what he avoided. He didn't talk about untapped upside. He didn't highlight flashes of greatness. He didn't suggest this was the beginning of a quarterback battle. Instead, he delivered a message between the lines. Results matter more than potential, and that's what shook fans and analysts. Stefanski's tone wasn't angry. It was final, almost surgical. The type of tone coaches use when they've already drawn conclusions from the tape. He evaluated Sanders the same way he'd evaluate a veteran, by execution, decision-making, and trust. No excuses, no special treatment, no hype points for having a famous last name. As quiet as it sounded, Stefanski's message echoed across the league. The rookie wasn't ready, and the Browns weren't pretending otherwise. And that cold honesty is exactly why the conversation exploded the moment the press conference ended, because it opened the door to a much bigger question. Why did Sanders look so unprepared in the first place? The moment Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field in Baltimore, the tone of the entire game shifted. Not because the Browns suddenly had a spark, but because the Ravens immediately smelled an experience. What happened on that field wasn't just a rookie struggling. It was a young quarterback walking straight into one of the NFL's most unforgiving defensive storms. With almost zero real chemistry, zero first-team timing, and zero margin for error. Baltimore didn't ease him in. They attacked him the way they attack seasoned veterans, with pressure from every angle, disguised coverages, and blitz packages designed to distort a quarterback's vision before he even finishes his drop. Mike McDonald dialed up looks that forced Sanders to process information at hyperspeed. Safeties creeping down late, linebackers bluffing pressure only to peel back into passing lanes. Corner blitzes that arrived faster than his eyes could adjust. It wasn't chaos, it was calculated chaos, the kind that exposes any hesitation. And Sanders hesitated. Not because he's afraid, but because he was seeing live NFL speed for the first time with receivers he hadn't practiced with. The offensive line was scrambling too, adjusting to his cadence and tempo on the fly. A veteran guard even admitted after the game that it took them a couple minutes to sync with him. And against the Ravens, a couple minutes is enough time for the entire game to tilt. Every flaw the Ravens found, they attacked. Held the ball half a second too long? Ball. Sack. Drifted outside the pocket before his read cleared? Pressure. Trusted a window that wasn't really open? Defender waiting right there. Sanders wasn't just battling a defense. He was battling timing, rhythm, communication, and the weight of a debut happening under the worst possible circumstances. But the most important detail is this. Despite the chaos, despite the hits, despite the confusion, Sanders kept trying to make plays. And those attempts, especially the 2 shots into the end zone, became the turning point of the entire narrative. Because what happened next is where this story really takes a sharp turn. Those 2 end zone throws, the ones everyone keeps debating, arguing over, and replaying in slow motion, became the centerpiece of Shedeur Sanders' entire NFL debut. They weren't just incomplete passes. They were snapshots of a young quarterback caught between instinct and reality, between confidence and chaos, between believing he could make a play and learning what NFL Open really means. The first one looked like the type of moment every rookie dreams of. Protection broke instantly. The pocket folded, defenders swarmed, and Sanders had to escape on raw instinct. He rolled out, kept his eyes downfield, and spotted a receiver breaking past coverage. It was a classic off-script opportunity, the kind that turns rookies into overnight sensations. Sanders launched it, hoping for that magical momentum-shifting highlight. But the ball sailed just enough for a Ravens defender to close the distance. In college, that's a touchdown. In the NFL, that's the difference between just Sanders trusting his arm and firing a tight window shot into the end zone, believing he could squeeze it between defenders. It showed courage, it showed aggression, but it also exposed the learning curve. Those windows slam shut faster in the pros, and what looks tempting from the pocket can turn into trouble in a heartbeat. Sanders tried to force a moment instead of letting the play develop, and the Ravens made him pay for it. What shook people wasn't that he missed, it's that these 2 plays became the proof Stefanski leaned on during his icy post-game comments. To a coach, these weren't just mere touchdowns, they were signs that decision-making wasn't matching the moment, that judgment still needed refinement, that Sanders was chasing plays instead of controlling them. But the story doesn't end there, because once those throws hit the film room, stop there. Something even bigger came to light, something that sparked outrage across Cleveland and sent analysts into full meltdown mode. The moment the truth about Shedeur Sanders' practice reps leaked out, the entire conversation around his debut flipped upside down. What looked like a rookie struggling under pressure suddenly looked like something far more complicated and far more troubling. Because according to Browns insider Tony Rizzo, Sanders wasn't just underprepared. He was never given the preparation any backup quarterback needs to survive in the NFL. Rizzo didn't ease into it. He exploded. He said what thousands of fans were thinking, but hadn't yet said out loud. How can you expect a rookie to succeed when he hasn't taken a single meaningful first-team rep? Not one session building timing with Jerry Jeudy. Not 1 week working behind the starting offensive line. Not one real opportunity to understand how the offense functions at full speed with the actual starters he'd rely on. And then came the detail that sent shockwaves across the league. Sanders revealed that the first time he ever threw a pass to Jeudy was during the game, in front of 70,000 screaming Ravens fans, against one of the most exotic and punishing defenses in football. Not in practice, not even in walkthroughs. During live action. That's not just unusual, it's unheard of. Timing and chemistry between a quarterback and his receivers are built on repetition. Knowing when a route snaps, how a receiver accelerates out of a break, where he expects the ball placement to be. Sanders had none of that. He was operating blind, with no rhythm, no built-in trust, and no chance to react instinctively. Instead of playing fast, he had to think. Rizzo called it what it was, setting a player up to fail, then criticizing him for failing. It's not just a bad coaching decision, it's organizational negligence. And once that detail hit the public, fans, analysts, and former players all asked the same question. If the Browns believed Sanders might need to step in at any moment, why didn't they prepare him like someone they were counting on? And that's exactly why the national analysts started weighing in. Loudly, the national reaction hit like a tidal wave, and suddenly, Shedeur Sanders' debut wasn't just a Cleveland story anymore. It became a league-wide conversation, with some of the biggest voices in football ripping into the Browns' handling of the situation. And the loudest critique came from someone who knows the pressure of being a young quarterback better than almost anyone: Cam Newton. Newton didn't hold back. He didn't sugarcoat. He didn't dance around the point. He looked straight into the camera and asked the question everyone else was tiptoeing around. How do you expect a rookie to succeed when you don't even prepare him to? He acknowledged Sanders' flaws, the slow processing, the hesitation, the tendency to hold the ball too long. But Newton's bigger point hit harder. Those mistakes are coachable. You fix them on the practice field, not in the middle of a live game against the Ravens defense. And if the Browns weren't giving Sanders real reps, then they weren't giving him a real chance. Even Jason McCourty, who usually takes a more balanced and measured approach, couldn't hide his shock. He pointed out that Sanders wasn't just thrown into a game. He was thrown into a game plan designed for someone else. Every route concept, every protection call. Every read progression was built for Dillon Gabriel's style, not Sanders. McCourty emphasized that this isn't about excuses, it's about context. A quarterback switching into a system mid-game without practicing it with the starters is like being handed a playbook in a different language and being told to perform on national TV. And that wasn't even the most brutal reaction. Some analysts suggested the Browns weren't developing Sanders at all. They were just parking him on the roster and hoping they'd never need him. Others said the lack of first-team reps wasn't just an oversight. It was a sign the organization didn't fully believe he could play. Meanwhile, social media tore the team apart, especially after the detail emerged that Sanders hadn't even thrown to Jerry Jeudy before the game. That revelation turned frustration into outrage. But in the middle of all the criticism and noise, one voice stood out, a voice that carried more weight than any analyst or insider. Because while the outside world was tearing the Browns apart, Myles Garrett was doing the exact opposite. Myles Garrett didn't just defend Shedeur Sanders. He rewrote the entire tone of the conversation inside the Browns locker room. And the moment he stepped forward, everything changed. Because when the face of your franchise, the most feared defender in football, and the unquestioned leader of your team speaks, everyone listens. Garrett revealed that during the game, he went straight to Sanders after a rough drive, the kind where a young quarterback can feel the entire stadium closing in on him. Sanders walked off the field with his head down, frustration written all over his face. And Garrett didn't wait for a coach or teammate to step in. He approached him himself. He told Sanders not to get discouraged, not to let one or two bad moments define him, not to let Baltimore's pressure shake his confidence. Garrett reminded him that the Ravens aren't just another defense. They're elite. They confuse veterans, they punish hesitation, they live off mistakes. And he told Sanders something every rookie needs to hear from a superstar. Keep chasing your standard. You know what you can do. That wasn't just encouragement, it was validation. Then Garrett took it even further in his post-game comments. He refused to let Sanders become the scapegoat. He emphasized that football is a team sport, that the blame never falls on one player, and that the locker room stands behind their young quarterback. That matters more than people realize. Because when the media is tearing you apart, when fans are angry, when analysts are pointing fingers, the only voices that truly matter are the ones inside the building. And inside the building, Sanders isn't alone. He has the best player on the roster publicly backing him. That kind of support does more than protect confidence. It influences how coaches treat him, how teammates rally around him, and how the organization views his long-term future. Garrett's message was clear. This young quarterback isn't broken, he isn't to blame, and he isn't on an island. And that leadership moment is exactly why the next phase of Sanders' development suddenly looks very different. Because the locker room has already chosen to stand with him. Now comes the part that will define Shedeur Sanders' future. Not the debut, not the criticism, not the missed throws. What happens next is where careers are built or broken. And for Sanders, the path forward is clearer than people realize. But only if the Browns finally handle his development the right way. The first step is simple. He needs a full week with the starters. Not scout team reps, not mental reps. Real timing with Jerry Jeudy. Real communication with the first-string offensive line. Real chemistry with the playmakers he'll actually throw to on Sunday. If Dillon Gabriel remains in concussion protocol, and as of now that's still uncertain, Sanders could get his first true chance to operate as QB1 in practice. That alone will change everything. When a quarterback finally syncs with his weapons, the game slows down. Reads become cleaner. Confidence returns. The second step is mechanical refinement. Those end zone misses weren't random. They were symptoms of footwork drifting under pressure and a release that sped up when the pocket collapsed. These are coachable fixes. With proper instruction and repetition, Sanders can tighten his mechanics, stabilize his base, and deliver more accurate throws even when chaos surrounds him. The third step is crafting a game plan built for Sanders, not for Gabriel. Quick-hitting routes, defined reads, rollouts that use his mobility. Screens and RPOs that punish aggressive defenses. When a coordinator tailors the offense to a quarterback's strengths, everything becomes easier. From pre-snap decisions to post-snap confidence. But the final and most important step is mental. Turn the debut into fuel, not fear. Every quarterback who's ever made it in this league has a moment where the NFL punches them in the mouth. What separates the good from the forgotten is how they respond. And Sanders has something most rookies don't, a locker room leader in Myles Garrett boosting him, a fan base ready to rally behind him if he shows growth, and a second opportunity that could come as soon as the Raiders game. If he gets that start, he won't be walking into a storm blind. He'll be walking in prepared, supported, and ready to prove that his debut was a moment, not a label. In the end, everything that happened, the rough debut, the missed throws, the media firestorm, the questions about preparation, all leads to one undeniable truth. Shedeur Sanders' story isn't even close to finished. What happened in Baltimore wasn't a final judgment. It was a snapshot, a single chapter written under the worst possible circumstances. And as more details surfaced, it became clear that he was battling a preparation process that didn't give him a real chance to succeed. But now the script flips. For the first time, Sanders is positioned to step into a week where the plan might actually be built for him, where the timing with receivers can be developed, and where the coaching staff finally sees what he looks like with the tools every backup quarterback should already have. Add in the weight of Myles Garrett's public support, the kind of endorsement that can shift an entire organization's mindset, and suddenly Sanders isn't walking into this next opportunity alone. He's walking in with belief behind him. The Browns now face a defining moment. They can continue pretending preparation doesn't matter and risk repeating the same mistake. Or they can give their young quarterback the structure, reps, and confidence he needs to show who he really is. Because the flashes he showed, even in chaos, hint at something worth developing, not dismissing. And that's why the coming week feels so important. Not because Sanders needs to be perfect, but because he finally has the chance to be prepared. And when preparation meets talent, narratives change fast in the NFL. So the real question now isn't about what happened in Baltimore. It's this: when Sanders gets his next shot, and he will, how different will he look when he's actually given a fair fight?